chat event. Cool.
Sure.
So this is week 7. First of all, thanks for your time today, Ozgur.
Sure.
So we have done like a fireside chat event so far 6 times. We invited like a previous attendees of the program, like a Chris and Frank. Also, some of my startup friends, they are running the startup, so they used to run the startup before. So like today, format is going to be like a slightly different. We wanted to hear about your background, what you worked on, like what's like a transition from like a professional career to more like academia side, and then we can open up the question to everyone.
Good.
As that sounds. All right, cool. In that
great.
case, you could take over my screen.
Yeah, so I'm not going to actually share slides. I'm just going to, like, it's more of a storytelling morning. I figured it's a fireside chat.
Okay, awesome.
So what I want to do is first give you, like Jin said, a bit of my background, where I'm coming from. And then I want to tell you about how I got into data science, data analytics. And then I want to talk to you about my startup kind of journey. It's a 3-year journey. I call it my most successful failure of my life. So I think it has a lot of lessons on what not to do and how not to start up. So I think it could be an interesting story. So I'm an industrial engineer by training. So my undergraduate degree was in industrial engineering. And when I started my industrial engineering degree, I said, oh, I'm going to become an industrial engineer. Then when I graduate, I'm going to go to a factory and I'm going to be in charge of everything in that factory, optimize that factory. But my second year in the school, I had a professor who was a really good professor. He was a great researcher. And I just wanted to be him. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go to a factory. I want to get a PhD and I want to be like that guy. So I started talking to him. I'm like, how do I get a PhD? He said, oh, you have to go to the United States. So I started applying to schools. And in 1994, I left Turkey to get a PhD in the United States. So I did my PhD in a sub-branch of industrial engineering, which is called optimization operations research. What you basically do is you look at business situations and you apply mathematical models there and try to formulate solutions to situations. And in going to grad school, just like going to undergraduate, I wanted to become a factory manager. Going to grad school, I said, I want to be a great researcher. I'm going to have Ozgur's theorem. That's my goal. I want to so I started working, I started taking classes, but then I realized, okay, research is very hard, like especially having a theorem on your name. That's not something like easy to do. Although I was working hard, it was becoming more and more clear to me that it's going to be tough to be a really good researcher. I finished my PhD and I said, I'm just burned out of school. I just can't see any school anymore. I think I'm done with school. So I started applying for jobs, and there is a longer version of this, but at the end of the day, I got a job from Silicon Valley and I wanted to move to California. So I said, that's great. So I moved to California. I started working for this company that does revenue and operations management. And what I was helping with the company was I was helping them price their products for different customers. The company was traditionally working with airlines and car rental services to figure out what the ticket prices should be. But we were now kind of going to other industries and trying to help them with dynamic pricing, markdown pricing, etc. My job at the company was creating the mathematical models in the software that was sold to the customers. And every week I would create new mathematical models. And on Fridays, I would have these 3 hours where I would talk to the software engineers, since they were the one who would code the mathematical models I developed. I would have to explain them in detail what the models do. And then I realized every week, the part of the job I look forward to the most was those 3 hours where I was like teaching the software engineers what my models were like. And I was like, So I left school and I thought I couldn't be in school, but it looks like the thing that I like the most about my job is the school part where I'm teaching to the software engineers. So after 3 years in Silicon Valley, I decided, okay, I'm gonna apply for jobs. And I got a teaching job at San Francisco at a business school. And I started teaching there. But then when I was teaching the business classes, I realized that although we were teaching business students, we were teaching and I was teaching optimization and operations classes. But I saw the classes were very theoretical. And I said, these students will not graduate and do theory. These are students who are gonna go and work in different industries. They want to apply things. And I said, what is the most applied part of operations? This was around 2002, 2003. I said, probably using data in decision-making is the most applied part. So I said, I'm gonna try to change my syllabus a little bit. So take a lot of the theoretical stuff and put data analysis. How do you use data to drive decisions? So I slowly started changing this. A lot of my faculty, like senior faculty, were like, this is not good. Traditionally, we teach theory. You shouldn't be teaching like applied stuff. But I'm like, this is really important. This is what the students want. So I started teaching these courses with a data flavor a little bit because I really liked working with data as well. In the meantime, I was doing some consultant for some companies, consultancies, mainly on inventory management and supply chain management, but again, using their data. For example, for one brand in San Francisco, what I did is I was trying to figure out what is the right number of assortments in a store. So let's say you're a clothing store. When you go into a clothing store, if you see too few items, you think that store is not very productive. You don't want to see the store. You can't kind of get a sense of the brand. But if you see too many assortments, you get overwhelmed. So the question is, what is the right type of assortment for each store so that you don't scare the customers because you have too many, but you also have your brand value kind of established. So I worked on problems like this, but just using store data, customer profiles, etc. So I'm doing these, I'm teaching classes, I'm doing some research, and I'm also following the industry a little bit, trying to see what the latest trends are. In 2007, I don't know if you guys know, do you know the software SAS, SAS? It's a statistical software. So SAS is a huge statistical software data company. In 2007, 2008, they made a huge donation to a university in North Carolina. And they said, can you start a master's program in analytics? This was the first master's program in the world in analytics. So when I saw this, I'm like, oh, this is an interesting development. So, and I was like, so maybe the idea of data is going to grow and we need to learn more from data is going to become more important. And then after that, as I'm following the news, I'm looking at how different companies grow. And you know, big companies usually grow by mergers and acquisitions. They don't just internally grow. They say, oh, I like what this company is doing. I'm going to buy them. I like what this company is doing. I'm going to buy them. So I'm following these different acquisitions. And in 2008, I think, IBM did 3 acquisitions, one after the other. And IBM makes like 10 acquisitions a year. That's their main thing. But the companies were iLog, Cognos, and SPSS. So do you guys know what SPSS does? Does anyone know what SPSS does? It's SPSS. SPSS is another statistical software company. So they do data analytics. Does anyone know what Cognos do? Cognos is a business intelligence company. And then iLog does optimization. So in 1 year, IBM purchased 3 big companies. One was a descriptive analytics company, one was a predictive analytics company, one was a prescriptive analytics company. And those are actually, if you have studied analytics, those are the 3 important type of analytics that any company, any organization can use. So when I saw this, I said, oh, it looks like they are trying to be really strong in data analytics, which made me even more of like, it made it like, it was obvious to me that data analytics, data science is like at the verge of explosion. So I went to my school in San Francisco and I said, we should start a master's program. And this is a government school. They said, oh, let's look into it. But nothing happened. By this time, it's 2011. And then in the meantime, I'm talking to my friends in Silicon Valley, and I'm asking them, oh, like I have new data coming to me from different companies, and I want to know how to analyze them. What do you use? Do you use SAS? Do you use SPSS? Do you use Minitab? Do you use MATLAB? They said, oh, there is a free software called R that's very popular in Google. So we are all using R. So I'm like, okay, maybe I should learn R now. So I started learning R slowly. And I really want to do something more about data analytics, but I am not really getting the traction I want. So as I'm working on data analytics, I also have different friends. Since I live in Silicon Valley, people approach me. They're like, oh, let's try to like do a startup together. Like in 2012, I had one friend coming to, I had a blog where I would write about my past. Every week, I would pick one song from my past and I would write the memories attached to it. And this one friend of mine said, you know, this could be a really cool social platform because people usually like songs, they unite over songs. So why don't we like have a platform where somebody puts a song and they put their memory and then other people contribute their memories. And then it becomes this really fun place where people read about each other's lives. So for like maybe 3 months, we started thinking about this, but then we realized like it's not going to really work out because I think if you go to back in the day, if you go to different sites, you could see something similar. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. In 2013, I had another friend coming to me. He had already one successful exit. He had a file storage company and he sold it, I think, to Box and kind of got some cash and he wanted to have a new business. And he said, I want to create the data repository of the world. So how can we, and I think we have some of them now. I think there's like Quandly or things like that. He said, I know you deal with data. What do you think? How do you think we can talk about data repositories? So for 6 months, we worked on a business plan on how to create data repositories in the internet, where you think of any topic, you go to do search there for data. And after 6 months, it didn't really go where he went to another project. But so there's this bug in me that I want to kind of do some type of startup thing. And I feel like before I get too old, I would like to do this. But unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of money. So I'm like, I can't quit school. I feel like you need to, if you're going to do a startup, you should do it full time for a while, at least at the beginning, till it really takes some roots. So I continue. And in 2014, I was invited, I got invited to Turkey by a university. They said, we know that you are kind of studying data analytics and we want to open up the first master's in data analytics in Turkey. Would you come and help us start this program? And I said, sure, I will come for 1 year because I love my life in San Francisco. I don't want to come to Turkey for a long time, but it'll be fun to spend 1 year with my family and also help you start this program. So, and then I was talking to a college friend that I know for almost 20 years, who turned his parents' company into 3 big companies. He was a like Selfstarter entrepreneur. Like his parents had these companies that would do science for grocery stores. And now he was making like, he was making big brands, like image changes. So if, for example, if Shell, the gasoline company, wanted to change its logo a little bit, and it wanted to make sure that all gas stations had the logo changed in one night, his company could do that. He had a lot of nice infrastructure, and he had a lot of money. He had like 1,000 employees. He said to me, you know, I'm doing a lot of manufacturing, I'm doing a lot of construction, but I know that analytics is going to be one of the next important things. And I know you are an expert. So when you come to Turkey, if I give you some money, can you start a company? And I'm like, what? He's like, I'm going to give you $250,000 and I want you to start a company in data analytics. I said, his name is Mahmoud. I said, Mahmoud, this doesn't work like this. I said, I have an idea. And then I go to different people and try to explain them the idea, and somebody thinks the idea is interesting and then they give you money. You don't give someone an idea because you think they're an expert in a field. And he's like, I know. I said, let's do this. Give me 200. Oh, I got it. I said, give me the money. I said, let me start a data analytics consultancy company. And instead of going back to the US, I will stay here for a while. I think in 2-3 years, through consultancy, I will see the industry and I will see where the gaps are. And perhaps I'll be able to see a product and we can go that way. He said, you know, consultancy is not scalable. If you have 5 projects, you need 5 people. If you have 500 projects, you need 500 people. He said, I already have a company like that. I already have a company that I can't scale easily. I want to take a bet. I want to give you this money. I want you to come up with a scalable, revolutionary idea in 2 to 3 years. He said, until the money runs out, you can do whatever you want. I said, okay, I know data analytics. I have a little bit of experience in pricing, but I think I need to also have like, I don't know the Turkish business ecosystem. I don't know where the gaps are. I said, let's talk. He said, I have my own business. I don't have much time. I said, I'll give you 3 months. We'll sit down and try to figure out what to do. So for 3 months, we talked every day for like a couple of hours because he lived in Izmir. I lived in Istanbul. Like it's a 1-hour flight. So we would meet maybe once a week in person and we would talk every day online. And we would read articles. We would like look at Turkish newspapers. He would tell me about the industry. So we would try to figure out like where should we change, what should we do? And finally, he said, you know, one of his companies created wind towers for wind turbines. So he had a partnership with GE. GE was producing the wind turbines and shipping them from, I think, Sweden or something. And then his company was building the wind towers and they were assembling it in his factory. So he said, I have this working relationship with GE. Let's go talk to them, General Electrics. And then when we talked to them, they said, you know, smart city solutions, smart city applications are going to be one of the biggest things. So if you have connections with city governments, municipalities, why don't you guys look into doing something in smart cities? And in my head, I'm like, oh, interesting. So cities have a lot of data. You could get the data and try to come up with some kind of AI, some data science, some predictive engine for the cities. So we are going, this is an interesting idea. So we started thinking about that. What can we do? What can we do? And in the meantime, I hired 3 young people, one person who does project management and business planning, one person who does data science, and one person who does Java programming. So we had this like small team. They were all like 22 years old. And they said they had seen my profile and they said, we're really interested about like working for you. We like your idea. We want to do something together. So we all sat down. We were like, what can we do? So we said, well, if you look at the city has data about its gas usage. The city has data about its water usage. The city has about data about electric usage. The city also has, most cities also has a complaint hotline, either on the internet, either through phone. So they have a lot of data about historical complaints. So I said, what if we can predict complaints before they happen? So you will say tomorrow in this neighborhood, you're going to have a water problem. Well, with 80% chance because of the weather, because of the sewage system, whatever. Or in 1 week in this neighborhood, you're likely to have fire. So please be more careful, right? So we said, let's try to see if we can gather the data and develop a predictive engine. That's our first goal. So we started going to different municipalities. The first thing we learned that this data that we want to put into our engine, they live in very different databases in different parts of the city. So it's very hard to bring, because, and they live under different infrastructure, different softwares, different hardwares. So if you want to feed all of them into one engine, it's going to be very hard. Second, municipalities are very political places. For that reason, they don't always want to give you their data. They say, well, because this is complaint data, and if we give you the complaint data and you can't resolve the complaints, then people are going to be mad at us. Like, oh, you're looking at complaint data, you're not doing anything with it, and you're giving them your private information and this and that. Also, in Turkey, I don't know if it's how it is in the other countries, we realize municipalities are a bit incestuous. They say, oh, we're working with this software company already, and that software company is actually owned by one of the employers that are already in the municipality. So we are trying to get data. They're like, oh, this store is closed, this store is closed, this store is closed. So we went back to GE, General Electric, and we said, we couldn't get any data from the municipalities. And they're like, well, we knew it. We tried it for like 2 years, we couldn't, but we thought we were an international company. That's why they're not giving it to us. That's why we were like, maybe locals can do this. And it looks like they don't give it to you either. So they said, we have another idea. They said, what if we create a new data source? And we said, okay, could that be? We sat down again, talked for a while. Smart street lamps were very fashionable. They still are, but they were very hot those days. They said, why don't we try to sell street lamps, new street lamps to businesses? And then with these street lamps, we can collect data. So we started now going back to the municipalities and trying to figure out how to sell street lamps. But then now new problems, right? We learned that not all the street lamps are owned by the city government. For example, if you have a street lamp that is on a major highway, that's owned by the federal government. That's not owned by the city. If you have a lamp in a school district that's owned by the Ministry of Education, that's not owned by the city government. So we're like, okay, we can't collect data, but we said, what parts of the city does the city own? Where can we put city lights? They said, if you can put them in the city parks. So we chose one park. We started doing a pilot program. We put street lamps in this one park and we wanted to get data. And we thought that we could get data on like how many people go in, and then maybe like some ideas about if they use any apps, maybe we could get some demographic information, etc. But we realized that the technology that we heard about wasn't as advanced as we thought. For example, we went to one company that said they could measure how many people can go through using the lamp. So we said, oh, does your sensors work well? They said, well, it works really well unless the outside temperature is between 35 and 40 degrees. And we're like, why? They said, well, because we work with heat, we count people by looking at heat, and body temperature is between 36 and 37. So if the outside temperature is between 35 and 40, then we can't differentiate people from the object, from other objects. But then the city we wanted to work with was a coastal city, and the temperature was between 35 and 40 half of the year. So you're like, we can't use the sensor. So we tried like this, we tried to use different technologies. We finally found something simple that could do a few things. But then when it came to collecting data, we heard that we needed to get a special permit from the government, because the sensor we used was from an international company, and their sensors would put the data to a cloud system outside of Turkey. But in Turkey, if you want to take any data out to a cloud system outside of Turkey, you have to get government permission. The data needs to stay. So we tried to get that permission, but we couldn't. So after 3 years, this has been going on for 3 years, the money was mostly spent. We had some software, we had an office, I paid salaries, I paid some salary from, because I quit by the way, I quit university. So for 2 years, I didn't work for university. I got some salary, etc. So the money was, we had maybe the 250,000, we had 50,000 left. So, and it was obvious that we needed to pivot and we needed more money. So I went to my friend and I said, what do you think? He said, I love you as a friend. We haven't had any problems. But I don't think this is going anywhere. I think you should go back to university. I'm like, oh, do you think? He said, yeah. He said, I think you tried everything you can, but this is not working. I said, I feel awful. And he said, I'm going to take you to a little vacation. So he flew me to like a seaside resort, and he said, like, let's end this nicely. He said, this is how I feel. You and I were on a lake, and on the lake we were on a canoe, and we were kind of sightseeing. And at some point, I said to you, would you like to borrow my fishing rod, one of my fishing rods? And you said yes, and you tried to fish for a while. And while fishing, the fishing rod just broke. And he said, I don't mind. I had fun on this lake with you. We had some nice sights. I learned some things. I have a lot of fishing rods. You have another job to go, so we can still be good friends. And you don't need to worry about that you took my money. Like I said, I'm feeling awful because I never had any time in my life where I spent 3 years and worked so hard and I have nothing to show for it. He said, you have a lot of experiences. You did something that you would never be able to do on your own. So he said, don't think of this as a failure. Think of this as a learning experience. So that was kind of the end of the story in a way. But there are a few things I learned throughout the process that I want to share. But before I show you, I shared like 3 or 4 lessons I learned. I want to see if you have any questions. And then I went to Minerva. So that's the end of the story. But I'd love to hear if you have any questions. If not, I'll tell you a few important takeaways in terms of startups that I have. Go ahead, Taiho.
So how did you decide or get chosen or called to Minerva?
Oh, that's another story. I have, since I moved to Turkey in 2014, I have a lot of friends who are worried about my well-being, safety, because you know how in the news you read the country much crazier than it is. I'm also a gay man, so they're like, oh, the country's oppressive, so maybe they're gonna be like, they're gonna do something to you. I'm like, no, this is like, life is actually much better in real person than it is in the newspapers. But so my friends who were worried about my well-being, they constantly send me job descriptions, job positions. They're like, oh, there's a job, you should apply for this job. I found you a job. And I'm like, guys, I'm not coming back to the US. I'm very happy in Turkey. So in 2016, a friend of mine said, I found the perfect job for you. It's in San Francisco, but you can do it from anywhere. I'm like, this is interesting. And then when I heard what they do, I'm like, oh, they collect. I immediately thought about the data stuff. I'm like, they can collect every data about students' experience, and they can make it an amazing like learning experience using that student data. And I'm like, oh, they can build AI instructors. They can track students' eye movements. So I'm like, this is an amazing company to work for. So I applied for the job and I got for the job. That's how it happened, Taiho. And then I learned that they're not collecting that much data because obviously, first of all, privacy concerns, and also secondly, it's not that easy to do these things. Is that clear, Taiho?
Thank you. That's interesting.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Rhythm.
Thank you, Prof, for the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about when you were going about those street lamps and you said you were using some heat sensors. Like, why weren't, I mean, did you think about using the camera, and like, why wasn't that used?
So Rhythm, there were several issues. I just gave you one thing. First of all, since they were camera based, they were so first of all, if you want, the idea was we wanted to put a lot of these, so it had to be cost effective. So if you want to use high definition cameras, then you have to invest a lot. But the city governments in Turkey, they didn't want to invest a lot at first because they don't know if this is going to be a good idea. They said, we want the cheapest solution. That's why we had this very simple sensor that just looked at heat, right? So usually when you're trying to think of a solution, you need to think about the customer and their willingness to pay too, right? So you may have a very sophisticated technology, but it may not be feasible to put it, or it may be because of cost purposes or because of other infrastructure purposes. Also, if you put the sensors we talked about, they didn't require a lot of like connection to the infrastructure. But if you put cameras, in order to collect data, you actually need a bigger infrastructure. So that's one thing to think about. Does that make sense, Rhythm?
Yeah, right. That definitely makes sense.
Okay, Anna, go ahead.
Hi. So I have a question. If you could talk a little bit to the criteria that you used when you were going through this like 3 months of discussing ideas for what is the good industry for a startup and what is the good startup idea is. It's like, I understand the smart cities and the connection to data and the future, but it's so counterintuitive to me that in the end you went into business with government. So I'm just.
Yeah. I think the main criteria, Anna, there was, I think this is true for most of the world, and it's true in Turkey. If you have to do business with governments, city governments, or any government organization, you need to have strong social ties. And they said, we have at least 4 or 5 cities, since they do manufacturing, they actually had done some manufacturing contracts for different cities. They said, we have 4 or 5 cities with which we have really good, strong relationships. And there's also a bit of an underlying current. This friend of mine, he's also very forward thinking. He said, one thing about that appeals to me about smart cities is, he said, if we can make cities better, that actually helps us make the world a better place. And he said, I have 2 kids and I really want to tell them that, like, I don't want to tell them I made money because I manufactured. I also want to tell them I have done something good for the world. So like that was like, there was a very practical reason, which is these connections they had. There was also this very utopic reason where he said, I want to do, my next thing should be making the world a better place. And again, he really, like, he was rich enough that he wanted to experiment. So.
Would you go with it if it's just your money and your initiative?
No.
Okay.
No. If I mean, as I said, if I was using any of my money, what I would have done was create a consulting company, because like you have to do gap analysis. You You have to figure out where the gaps are. Either you know industry really well to already know all the gaps, or you have to work for that industry. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is consultancy, because that way you don't just see one company, you see many companies. Go ahead, Anna.
Sorry for hijacking the discussion. So
No
just from
worries.
here, it's an interesting point about you wanting to like learn about the industry and understand better. But now that we have the data more like easily available to everyone, that process of gap analysis is much more like
It's still,
open to the
yeah,
public.
it's a little easier. Data makes it easier, but it's really, I think, this is what I think. The biggest issue with the traction of a product is not the data, it's the people. So to understand people and what, like, data doesn't capture people well. There is a book called Small Data. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's about a marketing guy who says, big data will tell you about how to kind of create a product or position a brand. But what really sells the product is small data. So if Coca-Cola comes to him and says, we want to launch a new campaign in Russia, he doesn't look at Russian data. He actually says, I go to Russian households. So it's very important to talk to people, right? And I keep telling you this the entire semester, like talk to users, talk to potential users, do user interviews. And that's what he did. Like he said he would go to random houses in random cities in Russia, knock on people's doors and say, do you mind? Like he's like a nice guy, I guess. So because it's hard to get away with this. And he would say, can I just come in and can I look at your kitchen? And he says, can I look at your bedroom? And he says, by looking at the kitchen and the bedroom of a person, I can tell a lot about their aspirations. One thing he said, for example, interesting was the fridge, for example. If you have a lot of magnets in the fridge, that tells me a lot about your personality. If you have a lot of magnets of cities, or you are either a traveler or you are a person who wants to see the world, who wants to travel. So this kind of thing, I think, so that's why, Anna, data will take you some distance, but what you really need to do for any product is do a lot of user research. So I have a few things that I learned that I will quickly share with you. One was, so I was like the CEO of this company, although it was a 3-person company. What was very challenging for me that I wasn't ready for was the variability of the work. One day, I would try to find the cheapest trash can for the office because we didn't have a lot of money. And I needed to find a strong trash can. We needed a trash can. I needed to find a strong trash can that was cheap. But the next day, I had to prepare a strategic presentation for the CEO of GE, like US. So it was like this variability in the workload was very tiring to me. So because one day you do something very small, the next day you do something very big. So what I tried to do was I would use my 3 employees to delegate so that I only did the strategic stuff more. But in general, when you start your own company, it's like, be aware that you're going to be running for everything. You have to think about the cleaning of the office. You have to think about the people management. So that's one thing that I learned. The second thing was employee satisfaction. So I hired these 3 young people who were so smart. They wanted to work with me. I was paying them really well. But after 2 years, they realized that, and they were working on prototypes, they were working on projects, but after 2 years, they realized that what they're working on is not selling yet. So they got very demotivated. And I was trying to figure out, I give them money, I give them flexibility, why are they unhappy? And I realized that I've hired these people because of the reason that they were so motivated, they were so engaged, they were so ambitious. But after 2 years, they realized this project wasn't really serving their ambitions. And their belief in me was slowly going down. So I learned that if you hire really good people, paying them well is not enough. You have to keep giving them the right projects. You have to keep the company and the ideas alive so that they feel alive. And at the end, they slowly left one by one, obviously. And I didn't blame them for it. So that's lesson number 2. That was really, at first it was shocking to me. I'm like, I pay you really good. Why are you like looking for other jobs? They're like, well, we believed in your like vision at first, and now your vision doesn't seem viable anymore. So yeah, these very honest conversations, because I told them at the very beginning, I said, I want this company to be as yours as mine, because if we want to grow, we need to make sure that we have ownership. So that's why we were very honest. They said, your vision doesn't seem viable anymore, and we want to help you a little bit more. But and then the last one is so the guy who gave me the money, my like seed investor, after the first 3 months where he worked very hard with me, he said, I have my own company to run, so I'm not going to be able to help you full time. And I trust you. That's why I'm giving you this money. So, but he said, if you want, we can talk once or twice a week, half an hour, 1 hour, I can make you time in my calendar. So that like, I'll help you with the issues, I'll give you directions if you need, etc. So I would call him once a week, usually Sundays. And Sunday mornings, like I would take a walk to clear my mind, to think about like how was the last week? What did we learn? What are the challenges for the coming week? And I was like, I would eventually at the end of the walk, I would get very upset. I'm like, things are not working. So I'd call him. I'm like, so this is what happened last week. This is what we're looking forward to next week. What are your suggestions? And he would give me some good suggestions. He'd give me some direction. He'd give me some contacts. But one week I was very frustrated. I was very depressed. And I said, I'm tired of calling you with problems. Like, because this is a friend of mine who I know for 20 years and we have like a lot of fun usually. But for the last few years, like for the last few months, all I did was call him and complain, call him and complain. I said, I'm just tired of calling and complaining. He said, I love that you call me with problems. He said, if you don't have problems, you don't have a business. He said, as long as you have a company, there will always be problems. The day you stopped having problems means your company is dead. He said, so don't worry about having problems. Don't worry about calling me about your problems. He said, the only big problem is what happens when your problems don't change from week to week, month to month. As long as you have new problems every week, new problems every month, this means your business is changing, pivoting, growing, something is happening. But if you call me every week and if you tell me the same problems every week, then I would be kind of disappointed. And this is not happening. You have crazy problems, but it's crazy, different crazy problems every week. And I'm like, that's true. And then I realized that's actually true for life too. Like, I mean, we all have small challenges, big challenges, but imagine like, if you have no problems in your life, if you have nothing to worry about, it probably means that you're done. Like there's nothing to live for, right? So it was a really big lesson for me. And I can say I learned a lot of good lessons, and I've always wanted to like have a startup, but I never had the courage or the money to do it. And I was able to do that on very good terms. And I'm still good friends with my friend, by the way. We still sometimes spend time together. So that's my little story of my startup, or what not to do. Go ahead, Jin.
Oh yeah, Kota, you go first. No worry.
Go ahead, Kota.
Oh, thank you. Well, this is like known as like a, because I don't have any questions anymore.
Oh, it's okay.
Like you explained, but this is like it's like a slight, I guess. It's not as related as you might have expected, but
It's okay.
I'm just curious. Who was your friend who sold the product, their product to Box?
Oh, I will give it to you on the chat. His name is Steven Brady.
Because I also just know, frankly, also know. I just happens also know a person who also sold, like, who had their exit and sold their product to Box. And I was just curious, it might be the same person.
Yeah, his name is Steven Brady.
Oh, never mind. Then it's not the same person.
Yeah. No, okay, no problem. No problem.
Thank you for answering the question.
No problem, Kota. Jin?
Yeah, thanks for sharing your very interesting and insightful experience for us. I do have two questions.
Yeah.
First one is, if you can track any type of right now, what would you do it, and then how you gonna start to make money? That's like a number one question.
So
Yeah,
let me make sure that I get it.
Have any limitation.
So if I could start up in a new company, what would it be on?
Right, and then how you gonna make money? And then
Okay.
second one is I just wanted to know your opinion about privacy issue, also like any of like a GDPR. Basically, kind of information is digital asset that's actually not only company, actually country wanting to own, right? What do you think about like this direction? I wanted to know that your professional opinion.
So your first question, I have an evasive answer. So you said, well, if you could start up. First of all, Jin, I felt like maybe it wasn't because it was my idea, but I felt these 3 years were very exhausting to me. I was I went to a very dark place. I worked very hard, and it was just like, so I don't think I want to start up anything again. I'm very happy. I'm very happy watching other people trying to start things up and help them. And help them not make my mistakes. But to be like, if I were to look at it academically, what would I do? It would definitely be data related, but this is what I think. I'm going to actually connect the two questions. Has anyone here heard about the concept of data trusts? So the idea is this. We're coming to a point where the management of data should not be done by these companies, because Facebook has your data and they manage it however they want. Google has your data, they manage it however they want. I think different countries, especially EU now, is thinking of these concepts of data trust, where they say your data should be managed by an independent company or organization, not even a company, maybe a nonprofit, that will actually deals with different companies. Like if Facebook needs your data, they have to go through the data trust. And then if Facebook makes money from your data, the data trust has transparency into what happens with your data. They may even give you some dividends from what happens, kind of situation. So I think the future of data privacy should be evolved in that direction if you want to have a healthy future, because otherwise it's just, we're going into the surveillance capitalism land, and people's main goal is to make a product. It's like, oh, I don't care about the product as long as we get people's data, kind of situation, right? So I think this data trust idea is very important. So, and if I were to involve myself in any startups, I would love to be involved in a data trust kind of issue, organization. Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Johannes.
Yeah, just a quick question on that. So, but how does it work today? Because I thought that Instagram, like they say that the users own the data or the photos. Or is it a copyright? But the data they still have.
But who makes money from it? If Instagram makes money, yeah, that's what I mean by owning. I'm sorry, I use it loosely.
No, but it was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the last question in that case, kind of like a following up question. So in China, right? I was in China for a month, and then basically any type of application you use, anywhere you access, basically company can access any type of your data too, right?
Yeah.
They know your credit, they know what you talked about, they know what you just like who you talk to, anything, right? And then even like on the city, it's actually like a less policemen, like a human man, because they're like a surveillance camera, right? So basically they're just gonna track you no matter where you go to, right? And then that's kind of like, it's owned by the company, but like suddenly it's basically like, country started to take over the companies, right?
Of course.
And then
Yeah.
it was supposed to be like owned by, the data was supposed to own by company, but now it's not actually like, the company's entity anymore, the asset anymore. It's kind of like a country's asset too, right?
Yeah.
And then do you think it's going to happen to other countries that kind of like the same direction? It's because it's kind of like against like a globalization for the internet is like what web just spread everywhere. Also like after like a kind of like globalization, actually on the like web level, actually started to be like closing too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious on the
there is a good book on this. I read reviews. I haven't read the book itself. It's a very long book. Age of Surveillance Capitalism. It's basically, and that it talks about the issues you're talking about. I think it will depend on the democratic structure of the country, Chin, to be honest. I think if the country is less democratic, traditional democratic, I think they will probably find ways to use it for other purposes. I think like similar things are happening in Turkey too. Like I said, for example, Turkey doesn't allow any data storage that's collected in data outside of Turkey. So because they probably want to have some access to the data if needed, right? So my hope is that EU is going to be EU is usually the forefront in these things, because in my mind, China and America usually think about how can we use this for money? How can you use this for like people management? And EU has the same idea too, but they usually have a lot of internal forces that says, let's also think about like human rights. Let's also think about people's privacy. So I'm hoping that EU is going to be the pioneer in going in a better direction in data privacy, etc.
Cool. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind asking like one more question, actually, I do have a really personal question. It's kind of like weird because like you do have a student here, but the thing is that
that's okay.
Do you have any plan after Minerva? Or you want to achieve in your life?
No. To be honest, like at Minerva right now, as an academician, this is the best job I can have. In that, I'm wearing 4 hats at Minerva. 4 different hats.
4 hats.
4 different hats. Yeah. One is I'm teaching one course or 2 courses, one each semester that I really like, that I developed myself. That are like not traditional courses. 2, I oversee a few other courses and I kind of make them better. So I have this department chair role, if you will. 3rd hat, I am one of the co-supervisors of the AI lab with Professor Watson, which is so much fun. The students are doing amazing stuff. It's always like fun working with the young students, especially the Mesosound Foundation is such an interesting organization to interact with. So this is like dream hat. And the last hat I have is also very cool. I helped build a curriculum for executive education for Minerva's external partners. So for example, in the past, I helped develop curriculum for Recruit in Japan, LG in Korea, SK in Korea, etc. So at this point in my career, I couldn't find a job that gives me such different opportunities and have me interact with Minerva students. You have seen them a little bit for the last few years. They're really, and I'm not saying it because they're here. They're a different bunch of students. Like it was very unnerving at first. When I first started, I was shaking before every class. I'm like because they're very smart. They'll ask you questions that you're like, I haven't thought about that question. How did you do this kind of thing? It's really like, I'm very happy with Minerva. But of course, one thing I also learned in my life is you say you're going to do something like, oh, I'm going to be a factory manager. Then I decide to become a professor. And then I say, oh, I'm going to be a researcher. Then I go to Silicon Valley. Then I say, oh, I'm going to be in Silicon Valley forever. I became a teacher. So I think this is, I don't know who said this. Life is what happens to you life is the things that happen to you when you're doing planning, right? So you never know what's coming next.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. That's very interesting, and then I agree for you.
Thank you. And I also want to finish by saying to the students, like, I think you guys are so lucky that so early in your career you're able to get such great support. Even if you're not going to have a startup at the end in 10 years, it's really good to be in an environment like this. It grows you in ways that you wouldn't expect. So this is a wonderful opportunity.
Awesome. Shall we take a group picture for thumbnail?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's
awesome.
do it.
Cool. This is our transition.
Oh, it's good to see the faces finally. I was gonna be mean at the beginning and say turn on your cameras, but I didn't want to be like, I'm like, people in there are in different time zones. I don't want to.
Yeah. All right. 3, 2, 1, cheese. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing
Bye,
your experience
everyone.
too. Also.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks
It's
a
good to
lot.
see you, everyone.
See you guys on Slack.
Thank you, bye.
See you.